Alright everyone, yesterday I got pissed off at this dumb story involving the Navy cadets with the circle game and, all of the usual ne'er-do-wells of society calling them Nazis because of it. So I decided to write a short booklet and actually managed to crank it out, and it is now available, link in the description, to the new Burning Times, There Are No Witches. This is a direct refutation. I figured I wanted to end the year with something meaningful because I've been doing a lot of editing, but I hadn't authored work in a while, and I like these shorter works. And the reason why I like to make them more terse is I have a feeling that a lot of times manuscripts that are meant to have political need behind them, they're just a bunch of filler. It's like you could encapsulate the basic idea in 20 or 30 pages, maybe 40 or 50, but they're 300 pages long, and it's a bunch of run-ons and filler and some of the diagrams or maps or whatever that aren't even necessary, and it's just self-aggrandizement at some point. I don't like that. I like things to be more pithy. I like them to be more to the point. I like shorter works. I collect them preferentially, actually. Not because of a lack of reading comprehension or a lack of interest in longer works. It's just a lot of times people ignore the shorter ones. So I decided to crank this out to be sort of the last authored work of 2019. I'm still going to be doing some editing. The basic idea is I wanted to take my opposition to censorship, my opposition to the witch trials that we're basically in right now with all of the, everyone's extreme, we must censor the online world bullshit. And I wanted to encapsulate it in something other than a video form, because let's face it, these videos, I've done what I think is an okay job at making sure that the videos will always be available to people, but you can't ban a paperback so easily. If I own a paperback copy of a book, somebody would have to come to my door and confiscate it and throw it into the burning pile, whereas with a video online, of course, a website can be deplatformed. They don't even need a legitimate reason, as I go into within the context of this booklet. Most of the time, the censorship that you see, even by the standards employed by the people doing the censoring shouldn't happen. They say, well, we're interested in censoring hate-filled individuals, and yet most of those that are actually banned or deplatformed in some way are not hateful. They're not extreme, they're certainly not politically radical, and they're certainly not violent. I can vouch for that personally. I've spoken privately with some people that have been totally castigated by the legacy media, and I've never gotten the sense that they're violent. They've never fomented any violence to me or tried to get me into some weird Nazi worship cult or anything like that. So I don't know where these people are coming from. I'm beginning to think it might be bullshit. And so I decided to draw parallels between the 2010s and like the 17th century, the late 1500s, early 1600s. We're talking the Burning Times era. There's a lot of overlap. The self-righteous nature of those that are partaking. The quasi-religious but also quasi-political aspect of the censorship, the persecution itself. The similarity between being basically killed back then and being deplatformed from any meaningful tech communication today, it's basically, let's face it, at this point in technology, it's arguably the same thing. For people that make their living online, if you divorce them of all of their income, their communication with family, their access to emergency services, even platformed on like Twitter and stuff, they are at such a severe loss within society. It's basically, it can be sort of similar to a death penalty, or at the very least being exiled. And of course, some so-called enlightened cultures back then did the same. You've got the logical progression towards violence. That is that the claims of fascism, of extremism, are fake. The real extremism is that there are people out there that believe that it is okay to physically assault others because they've been labeled by BuzzFeed and the New York Times to be hateful or despicable or wrong. In all cases, you get the authority claiming self-evidence. Well, it is self-evidently true that there are witches, they're a danger to society. It's the same thing as now. There's no actual evidence of any of the claims being made. This so-called crime spree of extremism does not exist. Violent crime in the U.S. particularly peaked in the 1980s. It's at the same level now as it was in the early 60s, late 50s. It's not, there's no crime spree per capita or in an absolute sense. It doesn't exist. But you'd never know that to listen to the self-proclaimed authorities, because the thing is, and I line this up in the work in a single page, it's really that simple. There's a progressive, logical sort of framework by which moral panics operate. You start off with opportunists who generate a panic because they want to profit or gain power. You get other groups, especially within the corporate media, who are drawn to that like moths to a flame, specifically because it does them good. They can report on it tabloid style, make it sensationalistic. The sensationalism draws in the third group, which is basically the soccer moms, the pearl clutchers. These people are busybodies. They're perpetually bored, or they just want to be assholes, and so they go out and persecute. Then you've got the vast majority, the 90% of population that are fence sitters. They're not involved, they're not being persecuted, but they're also not trying to stop persecution because of a combination of they don't care, number one, they don't see the problem, or number two, even if they do, they fear being persecuted. They fear that if they stand up for the accused witch, that they'll be accused of witchcraft. Happened then, it's happening now. I see it all the time. There are plenty of people, even competent content creators, who refuse to challenge that status quo, who refuse to defend other people when they are deplatformed or spoken badly of by the legacy media because they're afraid of being considered in league with them. They're afraid of being compared with them. They're afraid that people will say, well, you're a friend of Nazis. You're a platformer of hate or extremism. So I wanted to make an actual booklet on this. I wanted to make something that 100 years from now would be left behind because I don't have any real reassurance that some file on a server somewhere will be. At the rate we're moving towards a 100% proprietary cloud-based internet where you don't even own your own files, and Google or Amazon or Facebook can delete whatever you've ever created at a whim, since we've moved towards that, yeah, I mean, like Windows 10, is it not basically just Microsoft's attempt to own everything that you're doing even on your personal computer? Couple more years from now, maybe a decade from now, you won't own anything computer related unless you're using antiquated software. I'll probably go and get a computer with Windows 7 on it just for storage and creation purposes. It'll be totally non-synced to the rest of the internet at large. It'll be a standalone platform for that purpose. They'll become valuable, trust me. There's a reason why they're trying to force people to give up their Windows 7 devices. Because the last stable platform Microshaft ever created. I mean, through Windows. Same with Crapple. Crapple's the first one that began doing this. They own everything that you ever do on your phone through their convoluted bullshit contracts. Even the courts had to step in and tell them that no, they're not allowed to prosecute people for jailbreaking their phones and actually allowing them to use apps Apple doesn't like. Believe it or not, when you own a piece of hardware, you actually own it. You're not just renting it from Crapple. Bunch of bullshit. So yeah, you should grab a copy. Link in the description, pinned link in the comments as well for those of you on YouTube. And there'll be a comment on BitChute, but again, and Ray needs to change this. I'm assuming this is a simple fix. Allow people to pin comments on their BitChute uploads. That's about all. Peace out.